Hi everyone and welcome to Isamu Rat Care. I'm joined today by my two very helpful assistants and my new babies, which I don't know if I've actually formally introduced yet, which is little Moomin here, who some of you may know as Mini Diddy if you watch my breeding series, and Snuffkin. So Moomin is from Mog and Snuffkin is from Mog's sister Isola, so a lovely little pair. Right, so what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk quickly about feeding kittens, which is why these two are here to assist me. Kittens, and I'm talking for kittens here for all intents and purposes, when they've been homed from the breeder, so normally around about 7-8 weeks old, until they're kind of past their rapid growth phase, which can take different amounts of time depending on the kittens. And actually, they're still likely to be growing in periods of kind of growth spurts for quite a few weeks and months yet anyway. So, but typically you would say that you start seeing the growth slow around about probably 12 weeks-ish, and then what you'll find is they tend to kind of need slightly less nutrients, except when they hit a growth spurt, which they will do. In fact, mine quite often still hit growth spurts 6-7 months old sometimes, but they kind of will have a rapid spike in their kind of weights through that period. So what do we want to think about when feeding rats this age? They do have different requirements to an adult rat. They're growing fast, and you can see they're quite small now. They will grow to be substantially bigger by the time they're what was the last weigh-in? Last weigh-in was about 220 to 230 grams. An adult rat in my line is probably going to be around about 380, 420-ish, that kind of region for a doe. So you can see that they're going to grow substantially more, possibly nearly double the body weight before they get to kind of fully grown, which is typically around 8 or 9 months for my lot, though after they've had a litter they quite often fill out a little bit more. So because of all this growth that they're going to be doing, and they're going to be doing most of it in the next month or two, they're going to need more protein, because protein helps them kind of construct a lot of the building materials for the body. It's vitally important. They also may need a little bit of extra fat as they're kind of molting through their coat quite quickly and obviously getting more and more. They're also going to need more vitamins and minerals, things like calcium, vitamin D, absolutely essential for young growing rats. So how can we kind of meet that? Now I'm going to make the assumption here that most of you will be in the situation where you have kittens living with some adults. Either you've introduced them or you're planning to very soon. These little girls at the moment are about 9 weeks old. I think I'm very bad at counting. They're kittens still anyway. But they're quite young. They're going to be growing quite rapidly, and they will be living with their mums and their aunties when they do that. So I'm going to be feeding them as though they I'm going to be feeding them alongside the adults, so I need to feed the adults an adult safe mix. I don't want to feed them too much protein, not least because hopefully they will be pregnant. Next round of litters in the works. But also because it's not good for rats to get a lot of extra protein that they don't need. It can kind of cause them to grow faster than you'd like them to. In an ideal world, you want to keep any rat on the kind of minimum amount of protein they need to keep in good condition, to grow nicely, but without growing stupidly fast. Grow too fast and they seem to be more prone to putting on weight into adulthood. They're also more prone to kind of tumours in later life if they've got that easy weight gain and so on. But they do need protein to grow, so you need to satisfy that. So how do you know what's enough? So if you're starting with an adult mix, that's normally around about 14% protein, sometimes a little bit less. And that's about right, 12 to 14% protein. Babies will need more than this. How much depends very much on what their bodies are doing at the time. So if they're in the middle of a molt, they need more protein. If they're in the middle of a growth spurt, they need more protein. We can assume right now that these girls will be needing quite a bit because they are still growing quite rapidly. So doing that, I still feed a normal dry mix, but I have a couple of different ways that I can kind of give them a boost. So the first way I do that is by treats. So treats are nice, rats like them. They're a good way to build a bond with your new kitten as well. And a lot of treats are high protein if you pick them right. So what are our options for high protein treats? So a very, very simple one, and if any of you make your own mix, you will have this on hand already, is Kibble. So this is just some of the kibble that I add to my normal mix. The advantage of using kibble. They're probably just going to turn their nose up at this now because they don't tend to eat much when they're out on free range. Ah, Sis, this is lovely. Yes, it is. You normally love this. Try that one. Nope, nope, they're like, oh my god, we're having to sit here on your shoulder. We're bored out of our brains. You're not letting us run. But yes, kibble's quite high protein. So the kibble that I use is typically around 20 to 25% protein. So that's a lot higher than the kind of 14% of an adult diet. So if I can get them to take a few of those as treats, which trust me, they will take in the cage, and they don't tend to take on free range because there's more interesting things to do that isn't nearly as boring. So if you give them one or two of them, like every now and then, they make great little treats and they're kind of packed with protein and help also top up some of the vitamins and minerals too. You can also use other treats, things like mealworms. They're quite useful. They're quite high in fat though, so you do have to be a little bit careful. Dried fish or dried fish skins. So I sometimes will hang these in the cage. They do quite like them. I'm having a bit of a sniff, but again, they're in sulk mode because I got them stuck on my shoulder and they're a little bit bored. So bits of fish skin, dried fish treats. You'll notice as well you can get a lot of kind of puppy and kitten treats, which are normally mostly dried meat. Try and get decent quality ones. You don't want to fill them full of kind of fatty stuff, and you're looking for that high protein figure. So look on the back, look at how many grams per 100 gram of protein or percentage if it says that, and try and make sure it's up in the kind of 20s range at least, to give them a bit of a boost, and pick stuff that they like and enjoy as well. The other way to do it, oh, I should mention another, this is kind of not a kind of treat you would just give them like on free range or a few treats a day or something, but it's a really, really useful thing to give kittens. So this is a chicken bone. Again, they normally go absolutely, well, they're going a bit more interested in this one, they do like bones. Bones are brilliant because they're a massive source of calcium. They've also got a lot of vitamins and minerals in them, so they're not that kind of really high protein treat, but they have so much else that's good for them. And as you can see, they're clearly irresistible because when they turn their noses up at everything else, they're having a good nibble on this and leaving little bits of dried chicken skin down me. So if you've got a kind of chicken that you're eating, actually chicken meat itself is fine too. I would normally give them kind of a whole wing or something like that to tuck into. You can give them something like that. I've actually dried these bones in my dehydrator a while ago because I got a mass from my hairdresser who is lovely and saved the rats a bag full of chicken bones. So I dehydrated them so they lasted for a good long while, and it makes a great kind of occasional treat for them. What I will quite often do with babies with this is I will take them out and put them in a spare cage, because adults can have bones as well and they are good for them, but they don't need them as often. So I might stick a bone in the cage and a little bit of wet food, which I'll get onto next. So bones are great. Egg shells are also good, as are the whole egg. But you don't want to give them too often because they are quite high in fat. They're also very kind of big, so these girls got a kind of full boiled egg between them a couple of nights ago. They did have a tubby belly for quite a while afterwards. I wouldn't give that one too often, but they really enjoyed it. And you give them in the shell, just crack the shell a bit so they can get into it, and great fun. If you want any clever ideas to serve it, I think I did a little bag to hang them in one of my 12 days of enrichment feeding. You're interested now. Are you bored of the bone? I don't know. Snuffkin still likes the bone. Moomin's lost interest. So yes, bones, eggs, great kind of occasional treats to top up the minerals and vitamins and such. So the other thing that is well worth doing is a wet meal. So by wet meal, I mean something that is cooked and quite high protein. So typically for me, that is a cat. Oh no, you lost your bone, Snuffkin. A cat or a dog food. These are generally higher protein than what's normally fed to rats, so they're quite good to kind of top things up. They're also usually quite tasty, but you do have to kind of see what works for your rats and what flavours they like and such. I normally will give mine maybe one of those. As a whole adult group, actually, I do still regularly give it to an adult group. They might get it once a week, babies a couple times a week as they grow. And that I judge very much off condition. So this I should probably talk a little bit about. So it's not as simple as saying, right, the babies, they need protein. I want to make sure I'm not giving them too much. It comes back to this balance where you want to give them enough that they're growing fine, but not enough that they kind of grow at a really super high rate and kind of start getting a little bit podgy. So what I kind of judge it off is their condition, and we've got a good example of this here actually. So Moomin is a typical kitten. She's actually got a nice feel to her, she's got a nice meat on her, good coat generally, but if I can hold her up against my conveniently black top, you may see there's some quite long guard hair sticking out. Snufkin, you're not helping, bless you. Yeah, there's some quite long guard hair sticking out just of her rump here. That is purely that she's ready to molt, and she just needs a little bit of extra nutrient to do that. Now, I find that quite normal at this age. I don't want them to get stuck in molt for long, as we call it, but I don't mind if they get in it a little bit. And the other thing to look out for, if you can tell, you probably can't from her rather filthy tail, if I rotate the tail slowly, you'll notice that there's a tiny, like, slight edge, and I'm probably going to have to draw this. Just don't mind me while I get a pen, because it's easy to say and hard to kind of show on camera. So where are we here? Right, so a perfect rat tail, it's nice and round. What you can find is something which I would call a square edge tail, which is mostly round but has got slight corners on it, so just ever so slight. It's kind of slightly square cross section, and then you get what we call a square tail, which the cross section is actually square. Now what Moomin's got at the moment is what I call a square edge tail. In fact, they're normally a little bit narrower at the top to the bottom, but they're still curved to it. It's not kind of really straight edged, and in fact in extreme cases it comes almost concave, where the sides of the tail pull in, and that's because there's no muscle left for the tail, and that's a sign that the rat is really down on some sort of nutrition, or has been at a critical point in its life, so it's never learnt to grow the muscle there. Moomin's is what I would class as normal for a kitten. I don't want my kittens to have perfectly round tails all the time, because that says they're getting more than enough nutrition and they're probably going to be fat. In fact, most of the perfectly round tails I've seen in life have been on a fat rat. But I don't want her to get to that square tail. So when I see those kind of square edges, I'll just think, right, they need a little bit of a top up. Let's have a look at Snufkin's, see if she shows it up. Yeah, Snufkin's much the same actually. In fact, slightly more kind of square edged. It doesn't help that the tail's mucky, but hopefully you can just see it. Yes, I know, it's me holding you like that, isn't it? Yeah, that's my glasses. Snufkin has discovered my head. I've also been to the hairdresser today, so my hair probably smells a bit weird. But yes, so that slight kind of edge to the tail. We want to be able to see it, but it shouldn't stick around, and that's where we top them up. So that's how I judge it off rats. I look for this kind of slightly long guard hairs on the bum, and the slight square edge tail, and it's right, you're ready for an extra wet meal. And I'll normally do 2 or 3 that week, and then I'll see how they get on. Molting wise, it will normally take them a couple of weeks to kind of go through a full molt, though it's faster as they're younger because it's kind of everything's in sync. I should do a whole kind of video on molting and coat condition at some point. In the kind of tail department, it can take a little bit longer. Muscle takes longer to gain and lose than fur, but you should see responses, and it's something you just keep an eye on. And I would say I get into that stage where it's really all about the condition of the rat once they're about, I don't know, 10, 11 weeks, because then I want periods where they're not having a lot of extras. The other thing to judge it off is feel. So what you're looking for is to make sure your rat feels kind of nice and solid. And these both feel pretty good at the moment actually. So they've got a good covering muscle all over them. There's no kind of particularly prominent bones. I can feel that the bones are there. I don't want it to be kind of all gibbly bits. They feel firm. To be fair, the kind of firm feeling is helped by the fact I breed for kind of muscular rats. I like rats that are kind of fit as well as kind of cute. But it's still something that you want to feel for. You want to make sure that they're not feeling kind of lightweight, weedy, very narrow. You can have a bit of a fight on your hands with some of these, in that sometimes kittens have got far better things to do than eat. They want to be out running, playing, and even when you put them in, I should say when I feed them a wet meal, I quite regularly put them in a little mini cage with a little bowl of food and leave them to hope that they'll eat it. But they can kind of get a bit distracted, they can get bored, they can spend the whole time clinging on the bars going, let me out, I want to do things. You have to persevere sometimes. Try different foods. One thing I have found that if I just feed pure protein, so if I just feed like a very meaty based dog food, they're not that interested. If I mix it with a little bit of cooked carbs, like cooked rice or something like that, they're more likely to eat it. Or what's quite useful is egg food. So that's another thing that's a good wet meal. This is like it's a dry substance that you basically mix with a bit of water. Vitalin's another version of it, which is sold for dogs. It's kind of like a nice kind of carbohydrate but protein based thing that you just soak, make into a little porridge, and that can go down quite well. And I quite like mixing that with the kind of wet dog food. They seem to like it more in a mixture than if they like it on their own. So you'll be able to kind of like get a bit of a feel for what they like and what they eat. But yeah, once they turn about the kind of 10 to 12 week mark, I will then be a bit more conscious about how much I'm feeding them in terms of extras, and that's where I'm more focused on the condition and use the condition to judge when they need it and when they don't. And you will notice it, but if you're struggling to see the condition, I'd really encourage you to go along to a rat show. There'll be a lot of experienced people there and they can show you different examples in the person. It's fine me trying to show you on the video, but I'll be honest, it's not that good. It's kind of a hands-on thing, and getting other people's opinions on your rats that really help and teach you. It's what I've done a lot of and I've been really appreciative of it. So definitely give it a go. So that's probably the main things in terms of feeding kittens. Like I say, it's something that you'll be thinking about for quite a number of years. And the main points are think about high protein treats and how you can use them, either small treats or kind of bigger, more rewarding treats like the bones and the eggs of the world, and the salmon rolls, which you also turned your nose up at, didn't you, Moomin? Then also think about regular wet meals. So they're on the normal dry mix, take them out of the cage, out of their group, offer them a wet meal at least 2 or 3 times a week when they're quite young, and slowly kind of reduce it as they get a bit older. And then once they're getting past about the kind of 10-12 week mark, start thinking about using the condition to judge them. So look for the kind of long, kind of straggly coat hairs around the rump, because the rump is always the place that's last to molt, so that's where you see the problems. Look for this kind of square edge on the tail. Make sure it doesn't get very square, because that's not good at all. Don't worry if there's a slight square edge, because they are growing and that's normal. And try and feel the general body condition, so a nice kind of solid, lovely feeling rat with lovely shiny coat, and you're doing well. And you're going to give them a long healthy diet that way. And don't forget that they can still be legitimately growing and need extra protein meals when they're kind of 4 months, 5 months, 6 months and so on. Keep that eye on the condition, because it's one of the best ways that you can feed them. So I think Moomin is settling down for a sleep here and Snuffkin seems pretty happy too. So we should probably sort you out a nice meal, shouldn't we? Get you something tasty. So over and out from us, and see you in the next one.